Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. It's a Saturday evening, so we'll try and start. We're starting a few minutes late, but we'll try and be respectful of your time. Honorable Minister for Health of Argentina, thank you very much. Dr. Carla, let me get the name right, Vizzotti, thank you very much for joining us. DG of Africa CDC, my brother Jean Kaseya, and the EXD of the Emergencies Program in WHO, representing our DG, Dr. Tedros, Your Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, friends. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to launch the International Pathogen Surveillance Network. We'll say a little bit more about that as the day progresses, and really this is the, I don't even want to say the end of the beginning, because we've been working for a long time, but I'm still not sure we're quite at the end of the very beginning of setting up a new network to serve the world in a hopefully unique way. But thanks for joining us this evening. This is the beginning of what will be, I'm sure, a very busy week for all of us, all of you, in Geneva. It's the reason we put this at the very beginning. Hopefully it's not the only reason we have a fairly full house and a lot of interest, but really glad that you've joined us today. So, to start off with, I'll invite my boss, Dr. Mike Ryan, who leads the emergencies program of WHO. He's also representing our DG today, to open up this event and welcome you. Mike, please.
Thank you, Chico. Thank you, my brother. And Your Excellency Vizzotti, you're very welcome, all other colleagues. I was hoping to be somebody in the audience could sequence the dengue virus that I had less than a week ago. So I'm in the right place, am I, Tulio? Spent my life traveling the world, and just occasionally you pick up some passengers along the way, you know. Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, I don't need to remind you that the COVID pandemic was dramatic, but sometimes terrifying for not just the people we serve, but for us as scientists in trying to understand this virus, how it was evolving, how it was spreading, what its trajectory was, how much kinetic energy was left in the virus, where was it going. And powerful tools of genomics have really helped us to understand how to monitor this virus, to check how it was evolving and spreading around the globe, to identify new variants, strains of concern, and allow for the rapid development of vaccines and therapeutics. You in this room have been the point of the spear in developing and expanding and scaling up those techniques in a global effort for scaled up genomic surveillance capacity during the pandemic. And more importantly, how you've all worked together to share that learning in a really open spirit of bringing all our institutions around the world together along the way. You know more than anyone, this capacity is not new. It's been used to great effect in polio surveillance and eradication efforts. It's been used in understanding and characterizing the emergence of Ebola and other filoviruses. It's been used for years to track human and animal influenza viruses. But the huge leap forward during the pandemic was a huge expansion and acceleration in those capacities. Some driven by availability of new technologies, miniaturization, price points dropping, but most of all driven by this absolute demand to understand this virus. But now this new capacity, this expanded capacity, needs to be sustained and better harmonized. One of the greatest tragedies in public health is not having the infrastructure to do our work, but a greater tragedy is losing the infrastructure we've already developed because we lack the capacity to pull that together into a coherent set of sustainable activities that can be funded, that we can make the investment case for these important processes. That's the core of WHO's 10-year global genomic surveillance strategy. But the case for genomics obviously extends well beyond epidemic diseases. It's vital to the monitoring of endemic diseases and phenomena like antimicrobial resistance. The use of these tools in fighting HIV, fighting tuberculosis, has been absolutely crucial, as well as understanding the growing risk of antimicrobial resistance. So the case for pathogen genomic surveillance is clear. It's clear across geographies, it's clear across diseases, it's clear across all the levels of the system. We've made the case, but now we need to actually build a better system that will sustain that case into the future. But it can't only be a tool for the rich. It won't work. I think Chick, one of your people, said it's like having half of an umbrella. So I thought it was a good one. Leave it in this speech. And you know, for these systems to work well, it's not only that they're functioning at all times, it's not only that they're always on, it's that they're everywhere. Not every day, but everywhere. And leaving any gaps in that capacity is leaving a gap in our understanding of the emergence of disease. You're going to hear today from distinguished panel of guests, and again, my thanks to Chikwe and his team for working so hard to pull this together, but not just pull this event together, but to pull the whole process together. And many people across our program have supported that. Gina Saman and Sylvie and many, many others across the program. But it now stands to Chikwe to lead us forward, at least inside WHO, to build and continue to build those partnerships. The goal of IPSN is ambitious, very ambitious if you look at it, giving every country access to pathogen genomic sequencing and analytics as part of its public health system. Sounds very easy to say, very, very difficult to deliver. But as COVID-19 demonstrated, and we're all going through those reviews at the moment around the world, and everyone's picking holes in the COVID-19 response. And yes, there are many holes, there are many shortcomings, there are many failings. But the community of science deserves a huge round of applause. Science mattered, scientists stuck together, scientists supported each other across many different fields. But now there needs to be a dividend on that for science and for the communities that science serves. Despite this growth in capacity at the country regional level, there still is uneven capacity, and certainly when you go down to national level. There are countries, for example, like Somalia, that have developed 30 different places in which they can do genomics and surveillance. They're losing it as we speak. The fiscal contraction that's happened in the aftermath of COVID, as ministers of finance and cabinets try to draw back the resources that health has been absorbing for the last 3 or 4 years. These are seen as not essential pieces of public health infrastructure. These are almost seen as choices. And this whole area cannot be seen as a multiple choice questionnaire. Shall we have genomics or not? Yes or no? You know, this is a must for the future. There are also standards too amongst ourselves in terms of data and protocols in analytics and in sharing, and finding ways to better streamline how we engage each other, how we use that data, share that data, how we commonly analyze that data. So it's not just in the external environment of funding. There are internal things that we need to work on. Building trusted networks between actors is the best way to do that. Not creating new entities, not creating new hierarchies, but actually creating and tending the ecosystem that we have. And this is an ecosystem of partners. So how do we, as scientists, ensure that those who make the investments, governments, philanthropies and others, see the value, see the return on this investment? I think that's happening. But there are challenges in terms of coordination. There are dangers of fragmentation and dangers of duplication. So we need to be very, very careful that we don't just see ourselves in a post-COVID, call it fog, but a post-COVID sense of euphoria that all will be right. I was saying it to colleagues just before. I've been through the post-Kikwit, post-SARS, post-H1N1, post-H5N1, and every single time we thought there was a new dawn. I see Dan Bosch there in the audience as well. We've been through this fight. We fought this fight a number of times, and inevitably what happens is we lose ground after the fact. Everyone cheers and claps for the scientists. They cheer and clap for this important function of surveillance. But it is desperately hard to sustain that investment. Importantly, we have growing regional entities and enterprises that are very important, that take away from this idea of purely global or purely local surveillance. I see our colleague from Africa CDC, Jean. Very good to have you here. Félicitations. But there are many other regional enterprises, regional ecosystems. So how do we build a system of systems, a network of networks that doesn't impose, but creates, I suppose, builds standards and builds a common approach by consent, by quality and by excellence, not by imposing any worldview or any global view of this on the world. So the IPSN will also test new innovations and contribute to the global knowledge base, and I hope also be a real driver of advocacy and financing efforts that will push money back into those institutions that you represent and beyond. That it doesn't become something that sucks energy from the institutions that make it up, but it's something that drives energy into that network, that drives resources, drives attention, and drives advocacy. So I urge you all, and you're all here for a reason, to continue supporting this. There's a much bigger church, a much bigger community out there that we need to bring on board with this. Dr. Tedros would love to have been here today. This is something very, very close to his heart. He drives myself and Chikwe crazy on this issue, because this is something he believes that must happen. So I pass you his greetings. I pass you his respect and his gratitude for everything you have all done over the last 3 years and more to take this subject to where it needs to be. But there's much more work to be done. So with thanks to you, let's make this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, for your leadership, as always, of the program, of the work that we do for the world. It's interesting that it took a dengue virus to take you out of action for the first time in 2 or 3 years, but we're glad to have you back. So, colleagues, I'll say just a few words about the network that we're trying to set up and the evolution to date, and then welcome a distinguished panel to take us through a few perspectives. IPSN, the International Pathogen Surveillance Network, actually started as an idea of the G7 during the UK's presidency. It started as something called the Pandemic Radar, led to a lot of discussions at the peak of the pandemic when we were all looking for solutions. But this idea, born out of the pandemic, was then curated, nurtured, developed further by a group of colleagues, many in the room today, Gina, Sylvie, to become the heart of what we're now calling the International Pathogen Surveillance Network. It was co-chaired, the initial ideation was co-chaired by an international consultation group that Jenny Harris, Dame Jenny Harris, sitting in front, and Bernard Schottlander, who has now left the organization for other things, co-chaired in providing advice to the initial secretariat that developed this further. And now the WHO Hub for Epidemic and Pandemic Intelligence has taken over the coordination function, but this is really to recognize many colleagues in-house that have contributed to this, both in terms of the initial secretariat, but also colleagues that have developed the genomic approach and its utility for the response to many of the infectious diseases that we work on here every day and colleagues work on around the world. So while today is the launch, like I said, we've been working on this for a number of months now. With the initial funding provided by the German government, we've been able to support the core functions and core individuals working to pull this together. But already grateful to welcome to Rockefeller for providing some of the initial funding that has also helped us set up some of the initial ideas and opportunities, some small grants that we're using directly to support the initiation of genomic surveillance in countries around the world. This in itself, in its heart, will be a coordination platform, and that's why the N in IPSN is probably the most important word in the acronym. So far, we've established a leadership committee that includes government, includes regional organizations, includes philanthropy. We have already over 30 institutions that are contributing to the thinking, to the work that we're doing. And we've set up primarily 3 governance structures. One is the Leaders Forum that involves a small group of leaders from all the sectors I mentioned earlier. Something we call communities of practice, and I'll come to what that means. And the third initial function is called a country accelerator, and that's really to take countries from 0 to 10 or from 10 to 20 or from wherever we meet them, progressing them on the trajectory that they are. The first community of practice that we've set up is on data sharing genomics data. Everyone in this room will understand why that is very important, especially now. Some very difficult conversations happening on how to do that and the future of the platforms that we need to do that and how we can provide the thinking to contribute to the governance of them. But it's not just the platforms. There are many needs, data standards, access, equity that have to be discussed. And we want to provide a platform where that will be discussed with everyone that has a role to play in this bit of work. The next group is a country accelerator that really recognizes that while a lot of progress has been made by many countries over the last 2 years, 3 years, some have evolved quicker than they're able to support themselves with the capacity that they have. So once the initial procurement of equipment is completed and the ribbons are cut for their new fancy genomic labs, countries are really struggling in how to keep this function. What functions do our genomic labs play in the inter-pandemic period, if there's any such thing? How does it contribute to daily clinical work, to research, to other public health priorities? These are not easy questions to answer and not easy situations to resolve for countries. So together, we're trying to pull heads together and develop this function, but not necessarily as WHO providing you the guidelines on what to do, but really bringing you together so that we can learn, you can learn from each other, and countries can learn from each other, learn from experiences, and decide themselves what parts of those experiences they want and they think are necessary. Now, the Leaders Forum is the third group that is absolutely critical to guide this. So we've almost self-selected the organizations that are part of this, many of which you will hear from. The first group of leaders, and these haven't been democratically elected in any way. These are just by default organizations that have been actively participating at the beginning. So it's by no means exclusive, it's the beginning. And we were, to be honest, very pragmatic in how to start and really working with people on the table. But we really look forward as we grow this network that we come up with a way of choosing who leads us for the periods of that we define collectively in how to take this work forward. But I'll end my few words by saying, ending where I started. At the heart of this work is a recognition that we don't have all the wisdom to guide the world forward in this space. And no group here, no matter how much you have put into it, has everything it takes. This will require us coming together. The intellectual resources, the academic resources, the political power, the convening resource lies in a variety of organizations. We will do what we think we are best at doing, convening, guiding, providing a strong secretariat, a strong technical secretariat to pull this together. But we really depend on your engagement, on your leadership. We want to stand on the shoulders of colleagues that have done a lot of this work internally in the organization and externally. Many colleagues, organizations here have funded a lot of work, a lot of development in genomic surveillance around the world and put in incredible amount of resource into them. We want to make sure that we all get collectively more bang for our buck than we would have if we were going alone. So the key of the IPSN is how can we make the collective more than the benefits of our individual investments in this space, which we have all been very active working on for many, many years. So I ask you to join us on this journey, join us to work together. We may make mistakes as we go along. We will not be perfect from the beginning. We will work internally very hard to make sure we work as one team, but we really also ask you to join us as one team to address the challenges that we have in this space and the incredible opportunity that genomic surveillance, pathogen genomic surveillance offers for the world out of the pandemic. Countries have grown from zero to seeing themselves on a map, on a global map, that they have never seen before. And when data is presented, when WHO presents data, countries that were never on that map look at themselves and say, okay, a few sequences for COVID coming out of my small country somewhere are suddenly on a global map. That never happened. At the beginning of the pandemic in the continent I come from, you wouldn't have found more than 3 or 4 countries with data on a global map. That has almost changed completely, and that's credit to the work that all of you have done. So that's a history of where we are, where we started from, and where we are today. And I'll pause here and thank you again for coming and invite my colleague, Sarah Hesse, to take us through the next part of the program. Invite colleagues from the leaders group that have contributed in different ways to getting us to where we are today. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Chikwe. It is fantastic. I think I might be too short for this podium. It's fantastic to see everybody here today. And I also want to acknowledge IPSN is a global network, and we actually have hundreds of people online right now, if our live stream is working, watching this with us. So we want to acknowledge that and thank people for spending their Saturday morning, evening, and afternoon with us. As Chikwe said, IPSN is fundamentally a network, and networks are really only as strong as their membership. So we want to recognize everybody in this room. Many are already active members, and we want to ask those who are not yet to really participate. I'm going to put a plug out. Our website has just gone live this evening, and on it you'll find a lot of information about IPSN as well as information on how you can sign up. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our panel. So we have a very esteemed panel tonight. These are financing leaders, these are political leaders, these are technical leaders, and these are policy leaders from across the globe. They're representing their countries, they're representing regional organizations, as well as global institutions. And as Chikwe noted, we have a number of different organizational bodies that we've already stood up informally. And they've been highly active in working with our communities of practice, our Country Scale-Up Accelerator, and also our Funders Forum. So if I could ask the first 4 panelists to come join us on the stage. And there you go. I'll sit here. Thanks. Great, thank you. So welcome, everybody. Very happy to have you. Just as introductions, we have Dame Jenny Harries, who is the Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency. We have Professor Tullio de Oliveira, the Director of the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. We have Dr. Alexander Pim, who is the Director of Infectious Disease at the Wellcome Trust. And we have Dr. Mario Moreira, who is the President of Fiocruz Brazil. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start by directing a question to Dr. Jenny Harries. During the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the UK was conducting a large proportion of the global sequencing. And as Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency, you are at the heart of that. What learnings can the UK and others take from this enormous effort? And what did we learn about the importance of bringing pathogen genomic surveillance to the global stage? And where does IPSN fit into that story? In 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes. There's quite a lot of that. So good evening, everybody, Your Excellency and colleagues. The best thing about this is I get to meet the panellists beforehand, who I've only seen on screens before. So I'm delighted and really passionate about this work. I think the UK has shown leadership. I mean, everybody I think knows our website is often quoted across the world. And in fact, I was talking to Mike earlier about our data linkage, which has been quite revolutionary. But actually, if you said, what am I most proud of in that, it would be not what we do, but what we all do together. And one of the most important elements for me has been the UK's new variant assessment platform work. Now, through that, exactly in the way that I think we want IPSN to work, we have taken the skills that we've been developing, and yes, we want to continue, and yes, actually, we are also finding in the UK in quite developed systems that there is perhaps a lack of understanding of the huge opportunity that there is with pathogen genomics. But through the NVAP, the New Variant Assessment Programme, we have helped to boost capacity and technical expertise in countries, quite practical things like supplying reagents, supporting bioinformation scientists. And I think it's that collaborative working which is so critical. The other point is our new variant technical briefings. We have tried, we're a new organisation, but I say born in the pandemic to fight pandemics, which is no easy task. But from the minute we were born, what we've said is we want to be transparent. And so the new variant technical briefings were out as soon as we could get them out into the public domain, exactly in the same line as this, to try and get that to help. I think the benefits of genomic surveillance extend well beyond just pandemics. In fact, I think the biggest opportunity is in supporting endemic disease and how we manage that, and then we will not have, hopefully, the pandemics. So I think that increased value of access to genomic sequencing is actually an opportunity for us all to grasp. Despite the growth in the capacity in the world that we've just described, and I think you said there is unacceptable, I think, uneven capacity across the world. We have made lots of progress, I think, even just developing this programme, but that has to be a focus for our coordination and integration of surveillance systems going forward. Another key point, again, Mike has mentioned it, actually, there are a lot of technical and financial actors working in pathogen genomic surveillance. It's a very complex area in which to work. And the more that we simplify, the better I think it will be. And in many ways, IPSN is starting to fill that critical gap at the global level of being a single, obvious focal enabler, providing greater information sharing and collaboration. So I think four reasons why I think we need an IPSN, and I'm genuinely absolutely delighted to be here. First, we need to embed genomic surveillance in the broader public health surveillance systems. We can learn significantly more about pathogens together, but it's actually value for money opportunities, I think, in terms of national productivity, GDP, that is not yet articulated appropriately to some political environment, some of our professional colleagues, and where we have a great opportunity to grow this system. We need to have genomic surveillance in many public health programs already. We do that. But the IPSN then can break down the silos between those different areas of work so that we're all working collaboratively. And it's not just 2 and 2. We actually end up with 7 or whatever the appropriate nominal is. But I think 2 last points. Genomic surveillance capacity and capability, as I've said, we know is unevenly distributed. Many countries still don't have access to sequencing capacity or capability. And those that established it, as Mike has absolutely highlighted, are at risk of losing that. And we here with the IPSN can act as a focus. And then finally, the IPSN, the timing is right. If we lose the opportunity in that window now, we will not get on top of this. We've had sequences before of growth and loss, and this has to be the time where we all stay together and retain it. And I think sitting beneath the work that Chikwe has been leading particularly is a trust architecture which has previously been absent, which we can grow. So I am, as you can probably tell, totally passionate about IPSN and absolutely delighted to be supporting the launch today.
Great. Thank you so much. We very much want to thank the UK for both the passion that you bring to it, as well as really bringing pathogen genomic surveillance to the global stage. I think with that, I'm going to turn over to an academic question to Tullio. And that is, South Africa is widely recognized as a leader in pathogen genomic surveillance. The country was quick to rapidly scale up capacity during the COVID-19 pandemic, including as an early mover to establish the network for genomic surveillance in South Africa. The academic sector plays a central role in supporting national capacity during emergencies. From your perspective as director of the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation at Stellenbosch, can you tell us more about the successes and challenges you encountered in data quality, data analysis, and data sharing, and how can the international community break down those barriers?
Okay.
In 3 minutes.
Okay, so yeah. So basically, in South Africa, we set up our network very early. We set up in the beginning of 2020, even before the first case hit South Africa. And what was interesting in South Africa, all the work was initially funded by our own government, which really trusts the science and act accordingly. Yeah. And why that? Yeah, because we already had many of the tools. Yeah. We already have been investing for decades in science and technology, especially to deal with HIV and TB. And then when came a new pathogen, we could pivot quite quick. Yeah? But was not everything just great? Yeah? What we found is that initially, the world did not really saw the South African program as an asset. Yeah? As we discovered two variants, the Beta and the Omicron, we were putting severe travel restrictions, yeah? And that's something that was quite strange. How do you help in a transparent way with data sharing, be present and direct by the highest level of government, and we are still punished? But what we learn and what we are learning is that the virus do not respect borders, yeah? Even if you close a country, it's still gonna find. And I think one of the big lessons that we are having is that's not bad news to detect a new pathogen or a new transmissible variant. But the really bad news is not to do that quickly enough in a way that one can prepare to respond. Yeah? And that's what we are doing. So as the COVID pandemic recedes, at the moment we are pivoting again. Yeah? To be honest, we are really active in the ground. We started with using important metrics from the IPSN, a global program also that focuses on climate and infectious disease, which we call climate-amplified disease and epidemics. So what we are doing is really engaging with all the tools that we had to really try to characterize some of these big new epidemics coming, yeah, and sharing again in real data. So just two quick examples. In the last few weeks, with colleagues from Fiocruz, yeah, we sent a team to Paraguay with full support of the Paraguay Ministry of Health to characterize the worst chikungunya epidemic ever happened in the Americas. Yeah? We are talking about a new strain that was endemic in Paraguay that had a few mutations, but together with 2 degrees more of temperature, it fueled the worst epidemic ever. We are talking about 150,000 infections and 90% of the fatalities in Latin America. We also did send other teams to Malawi, to Mozambique, to characterize this explosive and very sad cholera epidemic, which I was discussing just before with the new director of the Africa CDC. And that's why we see all these investments that have been done in South Africa, many of them in collaboration with the WHO, AFRO, with the Africa CDC, with funders like the Rockefeller Foundation, now working together with the WHO Pandemic Hub and the IPSN to really try to make sure that what have been developed can be leveraged and can really use it to face the new threats, which many one will come. As we want to forget this pandemic, unfortunately, I really believe that we are entering the age of epidemics, but doesn't mean that we do not have the tools. And the genomics is an important tool try to control that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tulio. And I think we've all globally been learning a lot, particularly from South Africa, in terms of data sharing and data standards. So thank you so much for joining us. Now we're going to switch to the philanthropic side, to Alex. Our question for you is, the Wellcome Trust has been one of the IPSN's core supporters to date. As the Director of Infectious Disease at the Wellcome Trust, what are your thoughts on the role of the donor community and how it can play in both the IPSN as well as in the pathogen genomic surveillance landscape more broadly?
Great, thank you very much for that question, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I'm new to the Wellcome Trust. I've just taken over for a couple of months ago, and yeah, it's absolutely delighted that the Wellcome Trust is here and supporting this initiative, because I think it's really the ultimate extension of really 2 or 3 decades of investment and priority at the Wellcome Trust, going right back to 1992, the founding of the Sanger Center, the human genome, and the first pathogens, TB, malaria that were sequenced. And obviously we've heard how COVID has transformed the whole way we now see genomics within the public health. So I think Wellcome sees the IPSN as really the critical last part, if you like, of that genomic journey, where we can bring genomics now to have the impact on public health. And I think we will need funders and donors across a whole range of aspects of this to sustain it. And I think the critical thing will be to ensure, as we've heard, that this is a sustainable initiative. And I think the key to that will be ensuring that the genomics platforms deal with endemic diseases on a regular day-to-day basis and address HIV, TB, cholera, all of these diseases which have been around and blighting the communities that need assistance. So in terms of the Wellcome Trust, we're a research funding organization, and I think where we can potentially lead and provide input will be on some of the existing technical data sharing challenges that a network will have. But I think ultimately it's coordination which is going to be critical here. There are many initiatives both in research, many techniques, many platforms, and I think the IPSN has a real role here to bring these together so that we have a proper systematic response and a systematic way of building the platforms that we need. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate the comments around how coordinated financing really is the only way to sustain the financing and sustain the systems. And now I'm going to turn to question on regional and cross-regional collaboration. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, Brazil played an important role in supporting collaboration on pathogen genomic surveillance within the region, but also across other regions. In your role as president of Fiocruz, can you tell us what you've learned about collaborating and learning across regional networks and how it will be relevant beyond the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you may know, Fiocruz is a federal organization linked to Ministry of Health, and you are the most important science and technology, also industrial support from the public health in Brazil. We play different roles on these different fields. So as this kind of organization, we played a central role for the response of Brazil health system to the pandemic since the beginning, before the emergency situation. We develop and supply diagnostics for the whole country, the huge country, just to provide you an idea, we jumped from 1 million molecular tests a year to 18 million molecular tests that was developed by Fiocruz and also validated and got industrial scale within 2 or 3 months, and we also tested more than 10 million of samples to COVID within Fiocruz. Besides this, we delivered also 18 million of rapid tests. I'm talking about a couple of months to do this during the pandemic situation. We also was designated the reference for COVID-19 in the Americas, and with this responsibility, we trained the Latin American countries on how to detect, how to identify by molecular testing, and also we trained the whole surveillance system in Brazil. We have a lot of public labs that were involved in the pandemic diagnostic, COVID diagnostic. We created also a genomic network, a COVID-19 biobank as well, a COVID observatory, which will be the legacy to the next step to go further in such initiatives like that one. We were concerned not only to fight the pandemic, but to create bases to be prepared for similar situation that I don't know if it's coming or not, but we are trying to be prepared. We, through a partnership with AstraZeneca company, we received the technology to produce vaccine there. Within 6 months, we introduced totally the technology, so we are producing vaccine by ourselves, and during the pandemic, we delivered almost 230 million doses of vaccine within Brazil. For that, we had to adapt our vaccine plant, but nowadays we are building up a new vaccine plant that can expand the production up to 6 times our capacity, current capacity. Besides that, Fiocruz was selected by PAHO WHO to be one of the 2 hubs to develop and produce vaccines with RNA messenger technology in Latin America with a partnership with Argentina. One event with pandemic potential may arise in areas with fewer means of performing modern surveillance. So integrated the multinational surveillance approach seems critical to minimize the risk of crucial outbreaks dissemination. In this regard, Fiocruz, also University of Rio de Janeiro, and Rockefeller Foundation, support from Rockefeller Foundation, have been working to develop a complex multimodal system called ISOP. It's a open platform that it was developed to anticipate any possibility of a pandemic or endemic or any kind of situation that can ask from the government some initiative. So we are very confident that this platform can be shared with different countries within also this initiative as an open platform. I believe it will be very important to work together, and I would stress align and coordinate efforts with other pathogens, genomic actors to accelerate the process to ensure all countries have strong and sustainable health surveillance system. We reinforce that Fiocruz knowledge, technology, and also industrial training, industrial and also training capability could be put aligning to this initiative here. I would say that it's an honor to us to take part of this global cooperation to improve health and better lives anywhere. Thanks for the opportunity again, okay?
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our panelists. And now, in the spirit of the enthusiasm around IPSN, we have a second round of panelists. So we're going to bring up the second group. Thank you very much. So Yes, if the second group would like to come join us. Yeah. Yes, please. So we will be taking questions and answers, but we will be doing it after the second group. But you'll be able to pose questions to all of them. Some of that is for the sake of time, not that I don't trust everybody in here to have short, coherent, concise questions. So we just heard a lot about the challenges in the landscape, especially those faced during COVID-19, and how we're seeking to fulfill some of those challenges around regional and international collaboration. And for this round of panelists, we really want to look towards the future. And so the questions that we're going to be asking are around what models should we be building on as the IPSN grows, and what does a more successful and connected world look like? So the panelists, thank you very much, that we have with us right now are Dr. Jean Kaseya, who is the Director General of the Africa CDC, Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Very happy to have you with us. We also have Professor Leo E. Sin, who is the Executive Director of the National Center for Infectious Diseases in Singapore. Thank you. We have Dr. Naveen Rao, who's the Senior Vice President for Rockefeller Foundation. And we have Dr. Josefina Campos, who's the Director of National Genomics and Bioinformatics Center at Annalise Malbron in Argentina. So thank you so much for being with us. So I'm going to start with Jean to ask you about the very important regional perspective of your work. Africa CDC is supporting countries on the continent to become leaders in this space. As the Director General of the Africa CDC, can you speak to the approach that your organization has taken to build capacity in the region? What are your models for building regional expertise? And how can a global network like the IPSN support regional institutions such as your own?
Thank you very much for the question. Let me first congratulate Chikwe and all colleagues for launching IPSN today. I think this is something that all of us we wanted for a very long time. Let us start by talking about before, then I will talk about now, and I will talk about the future. Before, it was in 2017, WHO, they launched the Pathogen genomics. And in Africa, we understood very quickly in 2018 the importance of pathogen genomics for the disease surveillance and outbreak detection. This is why in 2018, almost 1 year later after the launch from WHO, we launched the pathogen genomics in Africa. And in 2019, 1 year later, we launched the Institute of Pathogen Genomics in Africa. We wanted to coordinate the effort of Africa to make sure that we can expand this initiative in all of our countries. Then in October 2020, thanks to COVID, we supported to launch what we call the flagship of the flagship initiative, what we call the Africa Pathogen Genomics Initiative. And this initiative is a model thanks to two drivers. The first one, it's a bottom-up approach. And we are learning from what countries they are doing to see how to feed the continental approach. The second one, it's a holistic one. It's bringing private sector, public sector, philanthropists, and academics. This is why we think that this one is an approach that can help Africa to accelerate very quickly. What did we do? What we did, first, we supported to operationalize and to coordinate the continental pathogen network. This one, I think our colleague Tulio from South Africa is talking about what they did in South Africa thanks to support from Africa CDC, because we managed to support 36 countries and to train almost around 520 candidates for genomics and bioinformatics. It's huge if we consider the size of Africa, if we consider that we have 55 countries But in 1 or 2 years, we managed to train or to support almost 36 countries. What is the next? What is the future? For us, the future is really to use what we call the new public health order. You know, this initiative, this is the vision that African countries have for the public health in Africa. And we learned also from COVID by saying that the National Public Health Institute are playing a key role to respond, to prevent and respond to outbreaks. It means we are building everything on our new, the National Public Health Institute, and also to the regional mechanism, bringing together local, national, and regional mechanism. We know that we can feed the decision makers. They can make appropriate decisions for them to have a kind of appropriation of this initiative. We are also working to expand the genomics and bioinformatics in Africa using some of the critical areas. The first one is the workforce development across the range of value chain. Workforce development in Africa is a critical area because at that moment, we just have less than 10% of our countries having appropriate workforce to respond to an outbreak. It means if today we have another pandemic, we'll have only 4 countries in Africa that have appropriate workforce to respond. The second one is the challenge of supply chain. All of us, we know that Africa is facing a lot of issues regarding the supply chain, and we'll come back to that when we discuss the local manufacturing and the challenge that we are facing. The third one is about data. I think colleagues were discussing about the data quality, how we are collecting data, how we are analyzing data. This is another issue that we are targeting. And we are also thinking about the innovative approaches. Innovation now is a critical area in Africa. I just came from South Africa where I had to meet colleagues from BioVac, Aspen, to discuss how they are bringing innovation. I see Vasi there, he was with me for the clinical trial meeting in Cape Town. It means this is an area where we think that we have to put some effort. The last one, we supported 36 countries. We need to expand to 55 countries. We have some success. We need to expand that. I think these are the areas that we are considering for the future of the initiative in Africa. We want also to say we are not stopping this effort just for malaria or for COVID. Now we are moving to the non-communicable diseases. I think my colleagues who are working on that, they are doing a great job. And this is the future of this initiative, the way we are bringing that in Africa. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I think I could speak for all of us. It's been very exciting over the past 5-6 years to see the growth of Africa's CDC and the leadership on the continent in this area. And so maybe I'll turn now to another continent, but also a discussion around country and regional growth. Singapore has been building its pathogen genomic surveillance capacity to rapidly become a leader in this space. From your experience as Executive Director of the National Center of Infectious Diseases in Singapore, can you speak to what it takes to secure political investment in capacity building of the kind that you have? What is Singapore's vision for the future of pathogen genomics, and what is the role the country will play in the regional and global landscape?
Thank you. Thank you for having me in this platform, and also to meet up with many of the very well-renowned panelists as well. So come back to my country, Singapore. We are actually very small island states in Southeast Asia. And we have a very open economy. And we are basically a travel hub where we are well connected to any parts of the world. So we long recognized that it is not likely that we are going to have a de novo pathogens coming out of Singapore. So we have to now look ahead in terms of what could potentially be imported into Singapore. And we have learned many of these lessons, right from Nipah to COVID-19. Essentially, Singapore is very likely to be the first few countries to experience any regional or global outbreaks. So I think with that in mind, from the health security perspective, it's not that difficult to convince our governments to invest heavily in terms of how we can protect ourselves as a small island city-states. And with that, I must say that the Singapore government has invested. First of all, they built the National Center for Infectious Diseases, where currently I'm the one managing the center. And this is basically provides Singapore research capacity to be able to respond to outbreak. And Singapore has long invested a lot in terms of the biomedical and also medical research in Singapore. We do have the genomic surveillance capability being built over quite a period of time. And one of the classical examples is the endemic disease, dengue. We have been tracking this virus in Singapore for over decades currently. So we just have to build on in terms of a basic infrastructure and capability, and we are able to then pivot it to COVID when SARS-CoV-2 arrived in Singapore. I think we have learned from COVID as well how to further strengthen the capability, not just in Singapore, but it's important to look at the region as well as international connections. So we have, in fact, bring up two key projects in Singapore currently. One of them is what we call PREPARE, which is a program for epidemic research as well as response. And we have another programs in Singapore, which are actually supported by philanthropists. We call it the Center for Outbreak Preparedness, where it basically focuses on regional collaborations as well as regional capacity development. And I think it's critically important because I think this part of the world in Southeast Asia, we need to be able to now have a platform for us to bring up the capacity within the regions, have trust among us so that we can share high quality data. And I think it's critically important for that information to be shared, not just for outbreak, but for endemic diseases as well. So I'm very grateful for the setup of IPSN and able to have that kind of ability for us to coordinate as well as accelerate the genomic surveillance in our regions, as well as allow us to be also plugged in into the international arena as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think we can also say we're also looking very eagerly to see the work that Singapore is doing and the growth in that region. Now I'm going to turn back to the philanthropic sector again and ask Naveen, as the Senior Vice President for Health at the Rockefeller Foundation, what is your perspective on the role of philanthropy and the private sector in driving innovation in pathogen genomic surveillance? And how can we best support taking new innovations and ideas to scale?
Thank you. Why IPSN? Surprisingly, the answer was given in 5th century BC by Sun Tzu, Art of War, who says, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you don't have to fear the result of 100 battles. But if you know yourself and you don't know the enemy, for every victory, you will suffer a defeat. It is this ability for us to know the enemy, which is what IPSN is put together. And to answer your question, what is the role of philanthropy and private sector? This problem is too big for any one sector to tackle by itself. And they talk about the golden triangle with the government on top, public sector and private sector. If you look at the golden triangle, individually, we're not going to be able to solve this and get ahead of these pandemics and outbreaks, epidemics. But if we come together, we have a chance. And clearly, there is an example that's staring at us in the face of the recent COVID pandemic. Prior to the vaccine that was developed for COVID, average life cycle for a vaccine development was anywhere from 15 to 20 years. The fastest vaccine that had ever been developed prior to the COVID was measles, which took, I'm mistaken now, it's either measles or mumps, I forget, but it was 4 years. And now to have accelerated a vaccine from start to finish under 1 year, that could have only happened because public sector, academics, private sector, government, philanthropy, everyone came together. Our platform was burning. It forced us to come together, and it showed what we could do when we came together. However, now in that cycle of panic and neglect, we are sliding into neglect. Pandemic is over, we are going back, we've separated, and I dare say that we will wake up one day and say, well, what happened? And as Chikwe said, it'll be a shame to dismantle what we've already built and what we know. So the philanthropy can play a role here in bringing people together. We can go to places and we can take risks that public sector and the private sector cannot. Philanthropy can take risks, and we can set the table and play the convening role. So allow us to do that, and we focus on equity, and we want to make sure that whatever we do, it is not just for the rich. And finally, it is an honor and a pleasure to put wind in your sails, Chikwe, and we are really honored to be part of this journey. Looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us on this journey, all of you. And so for our final speaker, we're very happy to have Argentina joining us today, and really looking at this from a country capacity building perspective. So we've heard about different country, regional, and international perspectives tonight, and about the ways they're building capacity for pathogen genomic surveillance. This is a testament to the fact there's not one route to capacity building, but there's many routes in this area. As the director of the National Genomics and Bioinformatics Center at Annelies Malbrun, can you speak about how you are building national capacity in response to the public health needs in your country?
Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity, and thank you all. So Argentina has previous experience in genomic surveillance capacity. We have been working in that for the past 10 years. We have made many case studies on outbreak studies for foodborne diseases, introduction of pandemic lineages for cholera in the country, also vaccine preventable disease, clones, surveillance. But with COVID, we have an opportunity, and that capacity was strengthened and accelerated. And now we have a dedicated center specific for genomic surveillance, which is quite a challenge because we already have a very well-built surveillance system in the country. So we have been working in how to use genomic technology and bioinformatic technology, not just whole genome sequencing, but the whole capacity of this new center to interact with human, environmental, and animal health as a source of pathogens in the surveillance system. We also have previous experiences in capacity building in the country. Just at Annelies Malbrun, we have more than 20 laboratories network space. So we already knew that we have this capacity, and that's what we get extra funding from the Ministry of Health that is accompanying us here today to create the Federal Genomic Network. So now we have a national genomic network. It's not only centralized at the center, and it was quite a challenge to get that capacity built in less than a year because we need to respond to COVID-19, but also to think how are we going to use that capacity later on after the pandemic. And so we use and establish genomic capacity in the 24 jurisdictions in Argentina with different technologies because we know we will need more than one to respond to what we need. And considering all the issues we have and the federal landscape that we have. For example, logistics, the issues of logistics between samples, between the countries and centralized. We also have problems with data release and time of data release to public repositories, and we think that creating the network and having province capacity will tackle that and help that. So we work with this network, but also with the National Reference Lab, with the existing laboratory networks to see how we can move forward. And that's what we thought, okay, we have to build capacity to keep the engine on after the pandemics, in between epidemics and emergencies. And that's what we thought about, tackling high prevalence viruses in the country that are important for us, respiratory viruses, enteric viruses, dengue, and also enteric bacteria, because we have the experience there. And with this resource available, we want to think of a hybrid pathogen surveillance system that considers the federalization, but also the nationalization and the centralized capacity to respond and expand that. And I think IPSN will link very much together in the concept, this community of practice we have in our national network that IPSN has globally. And also we hope that IPSN help us in and broaden our network of networks. We are already working building capacity in Latin America for genomic surveillance, but I think this can go and extend to other geographies, because as you said, there is no one model, and I think we can have different country models in different regions that we can help all together. So I think we have a very good way of working and working together with IPSN and sharing the Argentinian experience and the Latin American experience to all other regions as well.
Thanks so much. And I just want to recognize we had a very interesting conversation earlier, not just about the capacity building, but also the route to securing domestic financing, and which is really what makes these types of work sustainable. So we're really looking forward to seeing where Argentina is going in this space, because it's been a real leadership in it. I do want to say, just in recognition also that it's Saturday evening and that we started a little bit late, and the multiple panelists, don't think we have time for a formal question and answer period, but what we are going to do instead is to open this up to a 1-hour reception where we will have a chance for all of the panelists to be with the participants tonight, so that we can actually direct our questions one-on-one. So we're going to be asking you to take part in that. And I just want to say just a few closing before I turn it back to Chikwe for the closing remarks. So we're very excited about all of the things that we've learned today, and I want to recognize that all of the panelists here are part of the leadership committee of IPSN. And so have really been helping to set the direction for the work that we're doing going forward. There are also a number of other organizations on the leadership committee that aren't speaking tonight, but we want to recognize them, and because they've also been very critical to our work. And that includes the Institut Pasteur in Dakar, also Nigeria CDC, the Robert Koch Institute of Germany, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes of Health in the United States, Ashoka University in India, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Food and Agricultural Organization, as well as other senior WHO leadership. So I want to thank everybody for all of the work and your contributions. So thank you. And one last plug to everybody in the room and to those online. If you want to visit our website, sign up to join if you haven't already. This event will also be posted on our website, and there's a live recording on the WHO YouTube channel. And now with that, I'm going to turn it back to Chikwe. Thank you very much. Thanks so much to the panel.
So before we close, thank you very much, Sarah, and excellent panelists. You can see yourself the diversity of sources, regional, national, philanthropy, really well represented across the world, South America, Africa, Europe. So really, this is at the heart of what we're trying to do. How can we come together to solve what we think is one of the biggest challenges, but also biggest opportunities? Before we close finally, I'd like to invite a dear friend, Mr. Bjorn Kummel, who is the acting head of the Global Health Unit in the Federal Republic of Germany, to say a few words before we close. Bjorn.
Dear Chikwe, dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure to having been asked to say a couple of words on behalf of the German government obviously I'm the wrong one addressing you. The right one would have been my minister. Why? Because if there's one person in the German government who is really thrilled and pushes for international pathogen surveillance, then it's my minister, Karl Lauterbach. But unfortunately, he cannot be with us, but he will fly in tomorrow, and he will be with us tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, is obviously attending the World Health Assembly. On his behalf, I would like to express Germany's unwavering commitment to the vital role of multilateralism and the World Health Organization in building a better world. This is an exceptional World Health Assembly just before us, for many reasons. One of the reasons, and maybe I don't look like it, but to some extent, I'm considered a dinosaur in the WHO arena. Why? Because I've been attending 10 or even more World Health Assemblies, and obviously being part of the German delegation. And normally when we come to Geneva, before we brief the German parliament and afterwards report back to the German parliament, but it's rather not very active. It's just listening, and there's some exchange obviously, but not truly active. This is completely different this year. Just last week on Friday, we had a long debate in the German parliament, and the parliament, by almost consensus, adopted a resolution on the 75th anniversary of WHO and tasked us, the German government, to make sure that we are doing our utmost to technically, politically, but also financially, strengthening WHO, in particular on many things, but in particular, obviously, because of its role in addressing pandemics and surveillance networking. So really, we have a task to do. And this is completely new to us, and it feels different to be here in Geneva with this backing of the German parliament. Now, that being said, we firmly believe that collaboration without a focus on national borders is the key to achieving our shared goals. Germany has been actively supporting the establishment of the WHO hub, and we are really proud to be the hosts. And we've been supporting the establishment of the International Pathogen Surveillance Network as a testament to our dedication to a multilateral worldview. These initiatives are essential in enhancing global health security and strengthening our collective response to future challenges. Germany was hosting the G7 last year, and during that G7 presidency, we worked closely with our partners to develop the G7 Pact for Pandemic Readiness and subsequently the roadmap for practical cooperation to effectively implement the pact. The roadmap emphasizes crucial aspects such as genomic surveillance with a highly skilled workforce, harmonized data standards and protocols, and genomic data tools. I'm delighted to see that the IPSN incorporates these key aspects into its framework. It exemplifies Germany's vision of addressing public health challenges as global challenges, necessitating international solidarity and coordination. The IPSN is a groundbreaking model for a new form of partnership. As we heard, it brings together diverse actors from all regions to tackle critical challenges. It is through such collaboration that countries, multilateral organizations, and other groups can work together to achieve the IPSN's mission. In my opinion, providing technical and financial support and engaging in the IPSN communities of practice by actively participating in its day-to-day work are crucial ways in which countries can contribute. Being part of the IPSN Country Scale-Up Accelerator and assisting in the development and maintenance of genomic sequencing and analysis capabilities are paramount. And I'm truly concerned, as Mike was addressing this just before, we will see a decline in surveillance overall after the pandemic. And we, all of us together in this room, need to make sure that we push against this decline. From a German donor perspective, our sustained investment in the WHO hub aligns perfectly with our overarching aim of strengthening global genomic surveillance. We call on others to join us in engaging with the IPSN network, as it is through strengthening pathogen genomic surveillance that we can ultimately enhance global health. Finally, I'd like to thank you, Chikwe, and the entire team for this impressive launch and the event. Thank you.
So, colleagues, we're running 30 minutes behind schedule. I'm very sorry for that, but I hope it was well worth it. This is just to thank all of you for coming. I'll say one final thing, maybe go off script a little bit, which is always a little bit worrying to my team. But this is personal, because in the last 2-3 years, we have seen maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in investment going into pathogen genomics. And a lot of it has gone into the continent, to the African continent, and to many other countries. You know, what I'm most anxious about is, in 3 years' time, will we look back to these investments as having brought us collective good and benefit or not? Because we have seen lots of money go into big public health challenges of our time. And we have not always seen the results that we desire. So whether we look back in 3 years' time with satisfaction or with pain will depend a little bit on what we do collectively. And the hardest part of our work is at the intersections, where we come together. Philanthropy, government, academia, public health, is at the intersections. And that's really where this network is trying to work. So our work is cut out for us as we move forward. We, even as WHO, have to go into this with a lot of humility, that yes, we want to be at the heart of this and play a coordinating role, but we don't want to be in front of it and insist that everything goes through us, with us. But hopefully we can win over a lot of the colleagues in this room as we drive our national efforts, which are important, as we drive our regional efforts, which are important. We also recognize that we live in a single world, that we have to somehow come together and use the benefits of research learning in one part to the other and see whether we can derive collective benefit from this. So on that note, I look forward to reconvening this group in 3 years' time to evaluate progress. But for the next 30 minutes, I welcome you to a small reception outside and join us in celebrating this moment to start the World Health Assembly. Thank you very much for spending your Saturday evening with us. And thanks very much to the team, everyone that has worked very hard to put this together. Literally hours of work. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the colleagues in the emergencies program across the organization that have started working on this for many years before we've come to this stage. So thank you very much. I welcome you to the reception, and thank you again for attending and being part of this journey. Thank you.